All right, we're live. We're up. We're going to start tonight by discussing the dev talk from yesterday, May 2nd. I've got a slew of notes here. Let's just go ahead and bring that up now so you guys can take a gander here. I've got the dev notes on the left. I've got my notes on the right. Anyway, let's dive into it. So tonight's plan, we're going to discuss in detail it's kind of like one of my favorite things to do is discuss news, updates, patches, things that are coming, things that are happening, especially for Diablo, my favorite IP, my favorite franchise of all time. So we'll get into that. We'll go through the changes that are coming, what was tested in the PTR. Then we'll talk about the patch notes and what the devs talked about, what they're changing, adjusting from the PTR feedback, what their plans for the future season, season 5, maybe the expansion, Vessel of Hatred, etc. The first section is everything they announced and that was tested in the PTR. And then this second section is the patch notes. We've got a theme here, which we're going to discuss once we get there. But anyway, so Season 4, the season of Loot Reborn, right? Season of Loot Reborn. It has a very, very small theme. No major mechanic for the season. The theme is the Iron Wolves. It's like a small faction. You'll have a quest line with the Iron Wolves and reputation you can get with the Iron Wolves. Kind of like renown, to be honest. But you'll have a few season-specific rewards that go along with that seasonal journey, which we will get to at the bottom, at the end, after we talk about the patch notes. But the big, huge, the coup de grace of the season is Loot Reborn. So we'll go through the changes, right? So with the patch May 14th coming, we're going into itemization 2.0, what the community is calling essentially Diablo 4 1.0, how the game should have released, which I kind of understand that sentiment and kind of agree with it. So itemization 2.0, first and foremost, drop rates for all items across the board being reduced. The intent is to go quality over quantity, so that way you're not just, you do one or two Nightmare Dungeon runs and you gotta go back to town and salvage and sort, and they want to get away from that, right? So everything that drops, they want you to feel is like impactful and worthwhile, taking a look at, etc. So drop rates coming down. Then we'll get into the actual changes to the items. So affix pools being reduced. No longer are they doing the damage on Tuesday effects. The damage to slowed enemies that are also chilled, or damage to distant enemies while you're walking backwards. If you actually look at the list of affixes that are currently in the game, if you were to boot up the game right now and look at all the affixes that can drop on these items, it's over 100 affixes. It's silly. It's absolutely convoluted. They're so incredibly specific and niche that it's like, who wants these on their items? It doesn't make any sense. So they're significantly reducing the affixes pool and going to more general ones that affect a lot of builds, which is a positive thing. They are adding in skill specific affixes that mostly are coming in the tempering manuals, which we'll get to when we talk about crafting the tempering system. So they are adding affixes that are a little more skill specific. So that's kind of a callback to D2. That's how a lot of the affixes in D2 were. So that's a positive thing. A lot of them were, increase rank to a skill, but some of the ones they're adding change the way a skill works. Kind of like the runes from D3. So that's a positive thing. Okay, big changes. This is actually monumental. Rares can only have a maximum of 3 affixes now. Legendaries will have 4. So the system as is now, you'd have 4 affixes on rares and 3 plus a legendary aspect on a legendary. So the best in slot items were always the yellows, the rares that you found with 4 that you then imprinted a 5th slot, basically the legendary aspect on. Well, that's going away. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, if rares only have 3, legendaries have 4 plus the aspect, then why am I even picking up legendary, or why am I even picking up rares? Yes, indeed, you're picking them up to salvage them for mats. That's it. Boppity boopity spaghettios. That's all you're doing. So it's like, well, that's kind of silly. We'll talk a little bit about the patch notes. We'll come back to that one, but that's what's happening right now with rares and legendaries as far as affix counts. Okay, monster levels, that's not right. Monster level 95, thank you, 95 and above always drop item power 925 items. So no longer are these end game monsters dropping, an 800 level freaking power level item. Because that was the very first thing you would do. You'd get a full inventory full of items. You'd go back to town. You'd filter through and look through everything that's not 925 and get rid of it. But now that won't happen. Everything will be 925. So that's without adding a loot filter, because they haven't added a loot filter yet. Without adding a loot filter, they're making the game naturally kind of filter-ish what you're getting. Less items, higher qualities at level 100. You're only looking for legendaries, etc. So the game is starting to filter itself, kind of. It's still not the same as instilling a loot filter that's needed. It's a freaking action RPG that's loot driven and needs a loot filter. But we'll see. We'll see with time if they eventually add one. Hopefully they do. World Tier 3 now always drops sacred items. World Tier 4 always drops ancestral items. So once you're in World Tier 4, you'll never pick up sacreds. It'll always be ancestrals. So no need to look at that weird glowy filter on the items and you know what I'm saying. Anyway. Okay, crafting. Tempering system. One of the things I'm most excited about between the crafting, tempering, masterworking, the codex power, quality of life changes, and the pit. I'm super excited. Hopefully you understand why. Okay, crafting, tempering system. So the new tempering system. What's going to happen is you're going to be playing the game, you're going to be slaying monsters, you're going to be going around doing a bunch of stuff, and monsters will periodically drop tempering manuals. You'll pick up these manuals. It's like a item that you used, and you learn a recipe. The manuals are being aligned to the different categories that legendary aspects are in now. So you have offensive, defensive, resource, utility, etc. And within those categories, you'll have let's go use an example that they had on the chat, or they were talking about the barbarian has an offensive tempering manual that has to do with blade damage. So there'll be 4 different aspects, or excuse me, there'll be 4 different affixes in that manual that when you use to temper or craft on this item, you'll randomly get one of those 4 affixes and it'll get thrown into the item. New affix in the item, one of those 4 from that manual, and then the range on it is random. You'll get a range, you'll get a value. So increased blade damage, it could be one of the affixes, 20 to 40%, and then boom, you craft it, and okay, that's the one let's say that's the one you got. Increased blade damage, 25%. Okay, cool. So that's the way it works. Items, this is critical. Items have a limited potential for crafting. I wonder where they got that from. Last epoch. Forging potential. So you'll have an item, it's got 5 chances. You forge on it once, you see what you got, then you've got 5 chances to re-roll. Once you get to that 5th chance, if you didn't get what you wanted, well, guess what? Tough titties, dog. You just brick the item. And now you got to go trying to find a replacement for it because it doesn't have the accuracy you want. So I like the punishing. I like that. At the same time, it can be a little frustrating, but that's kind of a good thing. Okay, masterworking. So for the masterworking, masterworking is the end game final progression for the item, for the loot. So the way it works is you have an item, it's like an end game item. You can upgrade it. This is replacing upgrading. Masterworking is replacing upgrading. It has levels 1 through 12. You upgrade it. Every time you upgrade it, all the affixes go up a little bit. Every 4th, 8th, and 12th level, one of these affixes will randomly crit upgrade, and it'll get a huge boost. Randomly, one of them. On 4, 8, and 12, it could happen to be the same one over and over again, and that's likely what you're going to want for best in slot items, like a critical hit damage or critical hit chance or damage, whatever. It costs mats, obviously, that you get from the pit, which we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, once you get to level 12, let's say you're unhappy with it, you can just restart back at 1. You lose all those mats, but there's no bricking it. You can just go back through. So kind of a cool end game system for your crafting. Codex of Power changes. Every single legendary aspect in the game is now going to be included in the Codex of Power. The UI got completely reworked, so it's not as a pain in the butt. They did add a search function for filter function for equipped and equip items, and every time you find a legendary aspect on a drop, If it's a better roll than what you've got in the codex currently, salvaging it will upgrade that codex power. So let's say you find a perfectly rolled aspect, you salvage it. Now you can recraft that, you can re-imprint that aspect on items at max roll every time. Super, super useful. Hell Tides. They basically took Blood Tides from Season 2 and are implementing it in the game now. Higher mob density. There's a threat meter that's very much like the GTA wanted level meter. Increases aggro. You get like ambushed by mobs sometimes. There's a new zone boss, that Maiden of something, whatever, that will spawn. There's some new events, higher drop rates for sinners, etc. So Hell Tides are kind of like new and improved, just like Blood Tides, and now they're kind of like the fastest leveling experience, especially because after the patch, after the PTR, they're increasing the leveling and cinder drops even more. So Hell Tides are probably going to be like the preferred method for leveling. The Pit is Greater Rifts. They're adding Greater Rifts to the game. It unlocks after you complete Nightmare Dungeon level 46. It's an end game progression system. You go in, you've got a timer, slay monsters to fill a meter. Boom. Once you fill it, a boss spawns, or a portal spawns to a boss. You go in, slay it. If you do it in the time period, you increase the next tier or whatever of the Greater Rifts or the Pits, and it drops a bunch of loot and mats for masterworking. Fresh dick. Miscellaneous updates. This isn't all of them, just some of the ones I put down. They added a fight feature to pan the camera back a little further. Not as far back as I wanted, but it's still better than nothing. So no loot filter. There's some new uniques coming. There's a one based on Tyrael. There's some boots coming, whatever. Cool. Leveling has been increased across the board. So your level 1 to 100 is going to be, among a slew of other reasons, it's going to be faster. And this is a huge one. All items are tradable now, with the exception of items you've crafted on, tempered or masterworked, and uber uniques. So legendaries are tradable. Do we have the start of some kind of economy for trading in Diablo now? Let's hope. That's huge. That's huge for the game. That is huge for the game. So we'll see. Okay. That was everything coming. Had the PTR. Lasted for 10 days in April. Crazy shit happened. It was good. Lots of good feedback. Here's the big changes that are coming. Here's the big adjustments they're making, balancing, adjustments and stuff they're making. First and foremost, we'll go with the same order: itemization, crafting, hell tide, blah, blah, blah. For the drops, for items that have greater affixes. I didn't mention that in what's coming in itemization, did I? I did not. Items that drop have a chance that 1, 2, or 3 of the affixes are a greater affix, meaning it's 150% the value it should be. So let's say it's an RNG, random number generator. So let's say that you get a sword drop and it's got critical hit damage on it, and that critical hit damage affix happens to be a greater affix roll. It'll be 150% the max value. So if the max value was a 50% chance, 150% would be 75%. Right, chance. So that's pretty good. Okay, so now for changes post PTR in the patch that we talked about yesterday. Now any item that drops with a greater affix, 1, 2, or 3, it's going to have a little star icon at the end of its name, and it'll have a little star icon over it in the inventory, so it's easily identifiable. That was kind of a sticking point. It's like we don't know what's what. They had like a Roman numeral system before, but now they're doing a star system. The community, myself included, have asked for them just to change the color beam. It makes it super easy to identify, and maybe change the border color in the inventory. They don't want to do that. They said that they're entertaining it. They don't want to it could be complicated. And if it's a legendary with a greater affix, or if it's a Uber with a greater affix, or what, they just want to do the little star system. It's kind of not it's better, but it's not perfect. They acknowledge that rare magic items are useless now, especially for endgame. They talked about they're mulling around ideas for changes they want to make to bring those items back into relevance in the future, but maybe for season 5, but time will tell. With all drops rates being reduced, obviously your salvage mats that you get from those items is going to be lowered. So they made some adjustments for the cost of materials for crafting and upgrading, stuff like that. And they also increased drop rates. They increased how many veiled crystals you get from sacred, and a little bit more for ancestral, times 2 and times 3 respectively. They reduced the cost of imprinting. They reduced the veiled crystal cost on imprinting, so that's pretty smart. It's like a balance change. This one's kind of odd. I'm not sure why they put this one in here. Once you got to level 100, then you'd start climbing higher and higher. Let's say through like nightmare dungeons, you'd be facing like level 120, 130 level monsters. Your armor would have to scale up with them, or else you become incredibly squishy, right? So a level 100 monster requires like 9,263 or something like that armor to max out your resistance basically to them, your armor damage mitigation from them, and you have to scale upward. Like level 150 item require like a 16,000 armor rating. Well, they're capping it at now at 9,260, whatever it is, whatever the number is, 9,200, we'll just say. So while the monsters can continue to climb, your armor requirement will not. So, like, there's like one legendary aspect that basically gives you 9,500 armor just in itself. So, like, you're not going to need to stack armor on all your items. So, it's going to create some pretty interesting high damage builds, I think. We'll see how this actually ends up playing out when the season goes live, and if this is like a massive over tweaking. But this one has me a little perplexed. Cooldown reduction is capped at 75%. Again, we'll see about that one. We'll have to do a little more digging and playtesting with that one. Changes they made to the tempering system. They added a skip button for the animation because it was kind of annoying sitting there and watching the animation every time you freaking try to temper just to have your item be bricked. And then after you temper each time, they have a little screen that displays what accuracy you got, the value is, and the range it could have been. So that's pretty nice to know. Crafting, masterworking, they removed the animation every time you'd upgrade, but they left it in for the 4th, 8th, and 12th upgrade, just because those are the ones that you're receiving that random crit affix. And they reduced the chance to fail. So before in masterworking, you'd spend your mats, do an upgrade, spend your mats, do an upgrade, but there was a small chance that it could just fail. You'd lose the mats and it just wouldn't work. They removed that. I'm not sure why or what feedback was, but you'll see this theme up here that the game is moving further and further and further to a casual, friendly kind of game. D4, Diablo 3, and Diablo 4 are widely known to be like the casual gamers action RPG, as opposed to, you know, Path of Exile, which is like the hardcore blasters kind of action RPG that's completely gated for like casuals, just because the skill ceiling and the learning curve is so freaking high and aggressive that noobs like myself just have a hard time getting into it. They're taking the game Diablo and moving it further and further, easier and easier for casuals. The game is targeted for casuals. That's their target audience. That's what they're going for. They've openly admitted it. As a casual streamer myself, I guess it's kind of a good thing, but you don't want the game to become so incredibly easy that just a couple hours a week is enough to min-max the game. You know what I'm saying? So I know for a fact, you know, the Mega Blasters in the community, Rax Antarax, Woody Joe, Rob, North War, Riker, I'm probably missing a bunch, Hog, you know, they don't want the game to be casual at all. That's one of the reasons Hog doesn't even play the game anymore, really. He just plays PoE because he's not a fucking casual. But it is what it is, right? So I am here to give you the deets. Codex of Power, like I said, they added a search equipped and search equipped filter, kind of. This is not really filter, but anyway, Hell Tides, they increased Cinder drop rates, which were already pretty high, increased experience. You get more Baneful Hearts from doing the events. They added the Blood Maiden. She's got better loot drops, and they decreased the time to open a chest. That little cooldown, that little timer went from 3 seconds to 1.5. The pit is intended to still remain the hard endgame content, the grinder. If you're grinding it in groups, the person who opened the pit, used their mats to open the pit, gets 100% of the mat drop rates. Everybody else who's just in the party along for the ride gets 75%. So they're trying to not reduce the bonuses for group play, but they're also trying to not make it such a disparity between group, you know, how inefficient and crappy it is to run it solo versus in a group. Because 90%, maybe that's a bullshit number, but the vast majority of players, I think, are solo players. It's an action RPG. It's the name of the game. It's not a social MMO, right? Miscellaneous things I talked about. The obol pool, how many obols you can store went up to 2,500 from 1,000, so that's good. But gambling obols was basically Gambling Ovals was essentially useless, but now they're making it a little more juicy. They added that all items that you gamble once you're max level will be 925, so no more poop items will drop, and greater affixes can be gambled for and got. So basically, the end all be all, the tits McGee items can come from the gambler. So all of a sudden, the gambler is back in relevance. More glyph experience in Nightmare Dungeons. I think it said 25%. It's in here somewhere. Yeah, it's down here at the bottom. These are the clip notes. This is the TLDR for this Bad Johnson. It's pretty long. All the updates. Uber bosses, mat cost is going up 3 times as expensive, but the drop rates are 5 times better, whatever the fuck that means. It's like literally what they said verbatim. When you're doing your like little mini boss runs to farm mats for the Uber bosses, they also now have a chance to drop Uber uniques. However, that chance is less than the chance it is for Uber bosses. And Uber boss mats can now drop anywhere, so you're not obligated to only do those fucking little boss runs to farm mats to then fucking fight the Uber bosses. Uber boss mats can drop from anywhere now. So probably still not the most efficient way to do it, but as you're doing other content, you will be able to aggregate some Uber boss mats. Here's the Q&A section and the seasonal journey note here. I don't know how I feel about this one. They took this basically right out of the Diablo 3 seasonal journey. So what this is saying is, as you're doing this seasons and all seasons in the future, seasonal journey, you will be rewarded throughout the seasonal journey with items that fit an archetypal build for your class. So I've got the builds that are coming for each one. So let's say I'm running Barb, because I plan on running Barb for season 4. I'm doing the seasonal journey, and it gives me a bunch of the items, the legendary items with the affixes and aspects that you need to have a Dust Devils build. So in theory, well, in practicality, when I finish the seasonal journey, I essentially have at least a bare bones or semi-workable online build of Dust Devils for Barb without having to build it myself. I'll get the items required. That's essentially what happened. It came in sets, the set pieces, the set armors for the classes in D3. It's exactly what happened. You would do the seasonal chapters 1 through 4, and you'd get the Hatrig's Gift, and you'd get a new random set for the class. Not new, a random set for the class, and you would rotate each season. The problem with that was, other than like Legacy of Dreams and Legacy of Nightmare builds, sets were like the end all be all in D3 because the damage was amplified so freaking high. You just didn't have builds that didn't have a bunch of set stuff in it, really, except for Legacy of Dreams and Legacy of Nightmares. That was kind of a niche. So it's like, I don't like. I want them to move away from this, cookie cutter kind of like. They're not forcing you into a build, but they're trying to show you this is what a build could be. But like the community already can do that. There's like Maxwell.gg does that for the community. If you want to go research and look up a build, if you don't know what to do, but like you need to move back to like allowing the community to have that creativity. You know what I mean? Like to be able to just pick items that are really good together, see what you come up with. Give us the tools to make our own builds. Don't spoon feed us a build just because we completed a seasonal quest line. I plan on doing Dust Devils, but now it's like I'm gonna do the seasonal journey. I plan on doing Dust Devils because of how ridiculously overpowered it got in the PTR, which they're nerfed it a little bit. But instead of running Hoda Barb, I was gonna run Dust Devil Barb, see how it goes. Try it out a little bit. Now all I gotta do is a quest line. They're gonna spoon feed it to me. I don't know if I like that. So that's what they're doing, and then they'll rotate what build you get each season. And I don't know why the fuck they did the Incinerate build for Sork. Frozen Orb is going to be the tits. That's the new hotness. Why wouldn't you just have... I don't know what they're doing. They're doing the Blizz Dev things. Then they had a Q&A. Noticeable things they mentioned. Season 1 will be 1 week shorter because they did delay back 1 week. Seasonal powers will eventually return, so maybe we'll see some stuff like vampiric powers from Season 2 maybe return. Moving forward into Season 5 and in the future, the devs are going to pretty much solely focus on endgame. They were talking about how they at launch they had anticipated the leveling experience from 50 to 100 to really feel like the end game, and then there would be like one or two things you did at 100, but the real end game was 50 to 100, and that didn't end up being the case. People mega blasted and everybody got to 100, and then they got to 100 and they're like, what do we do now? My glyph is all maxed out, all my glyphs are 21, my paragon board is done. What do I do now? you know Uber bosses runs, and the bosses aren't even that well developed and well designed. There's other games that have incredibly more better designed and more interactable boss fights than Diablo does. So they acknowledge that they need to work on endgame. They need to put a ton of effort in it in endgame. And then, yeah, patch notes, balances, fewer dust devils, fewer frozen orbs, increases to 4 to 4. Just a bunch of random shit. Just a bunch of random shit. You can see it here. It's just all kinds of freaking. That's the new items. Those are the new items. I'm not going to go into all those. I'm gonna let, if you guys are really interested, you can go check out the Devil 4 patch notes on their website to see the new aspects and the new uniques that are coming to each class. And then down here way at the bottom, they've got all the down here way at the bottom, we've got all the bug fixes and patch changes and number values changes and that. I'm not gonna bore you with all that. I combed through this and built this Bad Johnson so for you guys to give you the too long didn't read patch notes, but essentially that's what's going on. That's what's happening. Yeah, so big changes, a lot of positive ones, some that I'm not 100% sure about. Time will tell. Time will tell with the patch on May 14th. I'm gonna blast it. That's all this channel's really gonna play. Me and the boys, that's all we're really gonna play. A little D4 action, but we'll see. I am hopeful. I've been perusing and lurking around other people's chats and their streams, and coming through Discord servers and Reddit subreddits and stuff like that, seeing what the community's feeling, what the vibe is, what everybody's thinking. It's kind of split down the middle. You got some left camp people, right camp people, some people in the middle, some people who are optimistic, some people who are cautiously, whatever. If I had to put myself into a camp, I'd probably put myself into the foolishly optimistic camp, but I don't know. I've soft spot for Blizzard just because they made so many games from my childhood that I loved, and Diablo is my favorite interpersonal property, so love the Diablo series. I plan on doing maybe a lore, like a character deep dive series on YouTube for it, so we'll see.